everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be a little bit different from my usual videos and maybe a little bit difficult. And I might rant a little bit and some of you might not agree with me, and that's fine. But whether you agree or disagree, do me a favor and keep your comments civil and keep this conversation as positive as we can. But this is something that I think about all of the time, and it's a problem that I have a hard time wrapping my head around how I should feel about it. And it just bothers me so much. So this is a video that I've wanted to make and just keep putting off because I'm going to express my opinion, and I've seen plenty of discussions on Facebook groups and Reddit that get really heated about this. So I know I'm asking for it, but here goes. So I'm going to be talking about enclosure size, naturalistic enclosures versus minimalistic enclosures, and the ethics that get involved with breeding, selling, and buying reptiles. I'm talking about something that every single one of us in the reptile community has been complicit in one way or another, myself included. I'm talking about racks and tubs lined up and down walls that enable breeders to work with hundreds of snakes at a time. I'm talking about the influence that breeders can have on other people when those people see them on YouTube pulling one snake after another from a rack of many tubs that have one hide and a water bowl on a bed of cocoa chips. Some people don't know better and think, he's a breeder, so that must be okay, right? I'm going to tell you that if I feel strongly about something, I'm not afraid to voice my opinion, whether it's a controversial topic or not. And I wish there was a way for the reptile community as a whole to change. I wish that everyone could take a step back and ask if we could set better standards and do things in a different way. I mean, at what point did we become complacent enough to decide that it's okay to keep hundreds of snakes in small tubs lined up on shelves with no enrichment because we're breeding them and that's a necessity for us to make a profit? If I decided I wanted to breed dogs and I put each dog in a crate, and to be economical about the space I need, I stack those crates so many high and so many long, would that be okay with you? I'd keep them warm and make sure they had food and water, but I might not be able to give them exercise or mental stimulation. But that's okay, isn't it? Because I'm breeding them and I have to be able to make a living. If anyone tries to tell me that's not a fair analogy, you're just fooling yourself. Keeping a large number of reptiles is a lot of work and it's expensive. And keeping a large number of reptiles in spacious enclosures with enrichment is even more work and more expensive. It costs a lot of money and it costs a lot of physical space. So if I need 100 different pairs of snakes in order to produce that never-before-seen genetic morph that I can sell for $10,000 a piece, and the only way I can financially and physically afford to do that is by keeping them alive with the barest necessities, then that's okay, isn't it? I'm being hard on the breeders right now, and I'm aware of that. But the breeders are not the only ones to blame. We're all to blame. The reptile community as a whole is to blame. We want our reptiles and we want them for a competitive price. So at some point we all started turning a blind eye to it like it's a necessary evil. I have a bunch of reptiles and a number of snakes that I've purchased from breeders on Morph Market who raised their snakes in just the way I'm talking about. So I'm just as guilty as everyone else. And I think that it's great that the more captive breeding we have, the less wild animals are caught and imported into the pet trade. But are we trading one evil for another? Now, as far as ordinary, everyday people like myself who aren't breeding but keeping reptiles as pets, I get that large enclosures and the necessities that go with them are expensive. A 40-gallon aquarium runs around $100, and a 40-gallon front-opening terrarium is even more. While you can buy a plastic Sterilite tub for $15. And you see breeders keeping their snakes that way. And breeders will tell you that it's a fine way to house a snake because they want to justify themselves doing that. But honestly, if you can't afford a spacious enclosure or proper enrichment for a pet reptile, then you just shouldn't have that reptile right now. Save your money until you can afford to give that reptile the kind of life it deserves. So here's what people that would disagree with me would say to justify keeping snakes in racks and tubs and minimalistic enclosures. One, they would say that snakes like to be in small, tight places. They feel secure that way. Well, they are partially right. Snakes do like being in tight spaces, and that's why they need a number of hides in their enclosures. Snakes spend almost their entire day curled up in a burrow, sleeping, but at night they leave the burrow and are very active outside of their burrow, hunting food, finding water, and looking for a mate. This is a time that they stretch out their bodies and they get exercise. Snakes do this just about every night. I've heard breeders say a snake doesn't need a hide in a tub because the tub in the rack is like a hide. Well, there's a big difference between a hide and the enclosure. They aren't one and the same thing. Another thing people will say is that plastic tubs are ideal for snakes, especially ball pythons, because they hold humidity well. Well, that's partially true as well. Plastic tubs do hold humidity well, and it's easier to hold humidity in a smaller space. So what? There's plenty of ways to maintain heat and humidity in all kinds of enclosures, including wood and glass enclosures. And that's not difficult to do. I've kept plenty of snake in glass aquariums with screen tops, and I've always been able to take measures to maintain the proper heat and humidity in those enclosures. And a snake can feel completely secure in a glass enclosure if you cover the back and sides with black window film and provide a number of hides and other enrichment items for cover. Breeders will also tell you that tubs are quicker and easier to clean and maintain when you have 100 snakes to take care of. Sure, that's true. But what are we talking about here? What's easier and more convenient for a breeder, or what's best for the snakes? If you're working with such a large number of animals that you have to put your time and convenience ahead of what's best for that animal, is that right? And finally, people will tell you that feeling a reptile needs a spacious enclosure with plenty of enrichment is anthropomorphizing your reptiles. I heard one breeder say that snakes don't care about pretty decorations in their cages. And that's true. But the more space you give them, the more you need to provide clutter and extra hides in order for them to feel secure. Providing environmental enrichment stimulates their brains, gives them more exercise, and gives them a little bit more of a chance to live at least a little bit more like they would in the wild. So that argument doesn't convince me. So how do we change it? Is it even possible to change it? If the only way to breed reptiles ethically is in small batches, could the reptile community as a whole ever accept or embrace that? If it meant that breeding reptiles takes a little bit more time and work, and buying a reptile becomes more expensive, would we be willing to change? I don't have any answers to these questions. I wish I did. I think the answers to these questions would need to come from someone smarter and more influential than me. Everyone in the reptile community has been so up in arms about the Lacey Act, and rightly so, but it's all anyone's talked about for almost a year. So why don't I ever hear anyone talking about this? Sometimes I feel like I must be the only person in the world who is bothered by this. Is it just me? Am I wrong? Am I missing something? I'm not a genius, but I went through graduate school and I've been a teacher for over 30 years, so I'm not a dummy either. And at the same time, I don't want to be closed-minded either. I'd be willing to change my mind about this, but this is something I've looked at and thought about for a long time, and so far no one has been able to convince me. I suppose if a true authority who wasn't a breeder, say someone like John Courtney Smith, was to tell me that racks and tubs are a good way to house snakes and tell me why, I might be able to rethink how I feel about it. I don't know, maybe it's something that's just become too entrenched to change. And maybe I'm just stirring up a big hornet's nest. Either way, it's something I felt I had to get off my chest. So if anyone has any wisdom they could share that would help me wrap my head around how I should feel about this, I'd be happy if you shared it with me. Whether you agree or disagree with me, I'd like to hear what you think. So just leave me a comment below. And really, I'm not trying to bring everyone down. Keeping reptiles is always for me about the joy and wonder they bring to me. I know this is a difficult topic, but I hope I've given you something to think about. And that's all I got. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next video.